Welcome to episode 7 of the Lights at Full podcast. I'm Brian Smith. With me, as always, is Brent Schmidt. We dropped Lauren off in a creek somewhere because we decided we couldn't have him continuing for too much longer. No, he'll be back soon. I promise. But today, we're going to talk very basic, and we're going to talk about vocabulary. There's going to be a test at the end. Okay, no, not really, but we're going to talk about basic lighting terms. If you're in the event world and as a lighting designer, I feel like, you understand a lot of this, but I think a lot of times DJs don't understand them or they use them not appropriately. So we're going to kind of walk through some of this and talk about what they are, what they mean, and what's actually behind it all.
Yes. So we are going back to basics. We're going to break it down with some terms. And the first one, I think everyone should know, is pretty simple, is DMX 512. What is it? It's the standard DMX digital control protocol for stage lighting. So it sends channel values to fixtures. So in one universe of DMX, there's 512 channels. In that, you can assign your fixtures into that universe. And after you've gone past 512, then you're going to need another universe of 512. So that's what, 100 or 1,000 channels of
Brent
DMX.
Can do math today.
I can do math, yeah. My brain's not there, but somehow the math is mathin'. So to break it down even further, those 512 channels are channels. And each channel of a DMX has a value from 0 to 255. So those values is where each your fixtures profile, again, we'll talk about that here in a hot second, what those values are. So if you have a pan, or let's just keep it simple, a dimmer, 0 to 100%. That technically goes from 0 to 255. A great example is if you remember back in the Show Express days, which I guess it's still around, you can physically see what that looks like. But if you're on a Wolf Mix or sound switch or a bigger lighting desk, you're not going to be able to physically see what that looks like. And then the next step from there is the mode and personality. So what you're pretty much doing is from each fixture, you're saying, hey, you're going to be a 3-channel mode, a 5-channel, 8, 12, 29, and some of these fixtures that get super in-depth and crazy, all the way up to probably 100+ mode personality. And that's just pretty much breaking down what that fixture can do in its full extent, all from its dummy mode all the way to its most complex mode. So, Brian, did I miss anything in just the basics of DMX 512 universe?
No, it's simple and complicated at the same time. If you're looking at your fixture and, sometimes you're going through and you're wondering why it's 0 to 255, that's why it's 0 to 255 to dial in the color by yourself on the fixture if you're not using a controller. So I think, it's super basic, but like the foundation of being able to do this is actually knowing what all that stuff does and what it is and why it's important to know it. We'll get more into DMX programming and talking about it in future episodes. But like I said, you need to know the foundations. And one of the things that you will hear us saying a lot, so we don't necessarily always call them lights, but we call them fixtures. If you're super old school, you call them a luminaire, very French. But that's the whole unit. That's everything all together. That's it's the technical parlance that is used in production, that is used by, real lighting engineers. I'm just pretending to be one. That's the terminology. So it's interchangeable with a light. Like, don't get hung up on it, but that is the preferred terminology. Because I think a lot of times when we're talking about lights versus fixtures, in an actual event setting, we're talking about the house lights. the work lights, stuff like that. And then the fixtures are what we're actually doing and what we're using to create the scene in front of us. And kind of moving that, lots of fixtures do different things. We've got washes. So again, simple, but like wash is going to be like a wide angle. We kind of talked about this in our, I think it was our last episode when we were talking about Ape Labs. Yeah, it was our last episode. We were talking about beam angles. And like that's how wide the light spreads. And so a wash is going to be very wide, like a 45-degree beam angle. But we also have the spots and profiles and beams, and like it's a whole beast. Spots are going to do more focused, beams are going to be very narrow and punchy, usually used more for aerial stuff. And then profile and ellipsoidal. I think these are two that get very complicated. And they don't need to be, but like you'll also hear people say Lico or source 4 or ellipsoidal, and they'll use all those terms interchangeably. And they are spot basically, but they generally are not moving spots. So they're stuck fixtures. You can focus them. You can, like a source 4 Lico, there's framing shutters so you can shape the light, but they don't really move that much. So great for lighting up performers or lighting up a stage. And also, if you've been around long enough and you weren't just using projectors to do this, great way to project monograms.
Mhm.
You can slide a gobo right into it. You can still get gobos made. And sometimes it's a lot easier than trying to get a gobo working on a projector.
Yep, 100%. And nowadays, as technology is progressing in a great way, now moving heads are now considered profile fixtures. And what that means is they're pretty much taking your moving spotlight and combining it ellipsoidal, and it has framing shutters in it. So diving deeper into the DMX universe, those fixtures are going to have a higher DMX mode personality because they need additional parameters and channels in their profiles to manipulate those framing shutters. So from a past experience, you can take your, think of a big, wide, circular spot, and now you can add frame shutters to come from here, and then frame into a nice, small little square box if you need to. And of course, change the color if needed. So those are considered pretty much a moving profile. So if you ever hear that or come by any of those, a lot of the top brands will have those. You won't see it any in the medium to lower markets lighting brands and fixtures that are out there. This is a big boy. Gotta throw a couple more than $6,000, no, probably $5,000 or more into just one of those.
Now, Brent, why would we want framing shutters?
So we can just keep the light exactly where we need it. So if you're lighting up, like Brian said, a stage, performer, banners, or if that's the design intent, sometimes I've actually seen framing shutters from a profile fixture used as a creative way to kind of create a dynamic light show. So if they already have it in the rig, you have a spot, hitting the center of the dance floor, and they can wash the whole dance floor, and all of a sudden it shrink it down into one little section. Maybe you have a kick line and you went from a full stage wash to now just a long rectangular shape over the dancers doing a kick line, let's say. So you can be very creative and intentional on how you design your lights using that profile.
Good to know. One of the other things that I think we kind of, speaking of like light fixtures and stuff like that, is like PARs. These are mostly LED these days. And, most lights that you use, and I think that most DJs use, are technically PARs. So like an uplight, technically a PAR. A lot of times they are built to be placed on the floor and not actually hung up from a truss or a lighting tree. But they come from the classic old school coffee can big PARs. And so you had PAR 64s, you had PAR 32s. I think you even had PAR 16s. I think some of the older DJs among us probably used those for their disco balls.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, it's the size and the angle of the light, but the 64s and 32s, those don't really come into play in most modern lighting for us. I know ADJ still makes that old school style, but with LED elements in it, for when venues are usually looking for that aesthetic, but not something that we encounter a lot. So, one of the other fixtures, and I think this is kind of an underrated one in DJ circles, and it's definitely more of a specialty, but it's a Fresnel, but spelled Fresnel. So you'll see it written one way, but it's said another way. You can thank the French for that one again. And this is, generally an adjustable beam, but with a very soft edge and a nice like fall off of the light. So it's, a wash light, but with a little bit more control. These days, again, most everything's LED, so you can get them that they will switch from cool light to warm light and everything in between. Our color one's available as well. And it's definitely something that's used a lot more in film and television, but it can be really, really useful for a stage wash or for washing like a specific area. They don't necessarily have framing shutters. A lot of times they will have barn doors, which kind of do the same thing. And it's that old school look. So I think for some people, it's a preference. Some people really like to use those for doing big stage washes. Some people use a mix of those and Licos or ellipsoidals, but it really just kind of depends on what you're going for. I mean, I have a couple in stock that I use, and I generally use them when I just need to do some warm white wash on a big area. And they work really well for that.
Yeah. And Fresnels now, too, also have the ability to have motorized zoom,
Yes.
which is another great thing. So you don't have to sit up there and try to do it yourself manually on a ladder at height. You can now do it in your DMX protocol of whatever you're using. Going off of from Fresnel's and in moving its color or moving its intensity is focus. With those, Brian mentioned with barn doors, with the Fresnels being able to shape and kind of pretty much close off the light where you need it to do. You're able to sharpen the beam, aiming, and a lot of it comes from when you're focusing a gobo in a Lico Source 4, or even your moving spot, where you're trying to make sure that either all your fixtures are in the same focus mode, and you're getting it. Again, it's a creative design situation if you want everything to be in focus. Sometimes not everything needs to be in focus. For a wash, for stage wash, I 100% agree with having a soft focus out, so that you don't see those sharp edges. Again, unless it's called for from either a different lighting designer or specifically, I don't even say by the client, but if anything specifically called for, or I guess if it's a monogram.
Right. Color temperature. This is, and I think I think we should probably do a whole episode on this, or at least partial episode with this and the next thing we're going to talk about.
Mhm.
But color temperature is measured in Kelvin, which, if you go back to your high school science, you'll know what Kelvin is. I'm not going to sit here and explain it to you because I can't remember off the top of my head what the actual definition of Kelvin temperature is. But I know I learned about it in my high school science classes. I'm sorry about it to my science teachers. I don't remember the exact way to describe it. But it goes from warm to cold, and it's counterintuitive because the lower numbers are the warm colors and the higher numbers are the cold numbers. We talked a lot about this with Lauren, 2700 to 3200K. That is like your warm whites, your candlelight kind of colors. And the color that I think most people who are watching this are probably of the age that you still remember a tungsten light bulb in your house. You may even still have some, but that's kind of like the idea. That's what you're used to seeing. That's what kind of the color that lights made forever. Now with LED, that gets weird, and I've got LED bulbs in my house, and some of them are really weird to me, and I don't like it. It is what it is. Well, that's another discussion for another time. But then, the colder colors, you start getting into around 5,000 Kelvin to 500 Kelvin, and that's like daylight at noon. And then you can even get colder than that up into like the 7,000, 8,000. And those are, since it's becoming a recurring character in our...
Bring it back.
The Chauve Easy Pin is somewhere
The
around like
Easy
7 or
Pin.
8,000. I don't know. Does this one turn on? No, it's not charged.
Nope. Let's just say it's
And those,
bright as hell.
it's bright as hell, and it's a little jarring when because of the color temperature that it is. So like these like seem like that color temperature seems like something as a DJ you don't need to worry about as much, but you're wrong, straight up. It's that warm uplights, getting those colors right. You're trying to match certain color temperatures. We've discussed it in past episodes. Some of the DJ lights now are starting to having the ability for you to dial these numbers in. It's important for you to know what they are, because it will affect how things go. And when it comes to your photographers and videographers, super important to them. They understand this. If they don't seem like they understand it, interesting. Not going to throw any shade, but interesting. But it's definitely, when it comes to the videographers, it's definitely important to them because they're trying to set it to make it look natural. So if you can tell them like, hey, like this is what we're doing for our color temperature, super helpful. And then of course, I'm always looking to make sure that I can try to eliminate the big video light that some of the videographers like to bring and kill my dance floor with. Any way that we can get around that and make them stop doing that is well done. The next thing we want to think about though is color mixing. The basic RGB, right? Red, green, blue, RGBW, RGBA, UV, WL. This is all color mixing, and it's all using LEDs to blend colors and create all the colors. I'm going to flip it over to Brent here, where we're going to talk a little bit more on like gel and color filters. And also, I would like us to touch a little bit on the way moving heads work with color, because it doesn't always work the best.
Yeah. These, like we said in past episodes, where you get filters, you get sometimes gels with the fixtures, and people just throw it away with the manuals because, hey, you could just get it up online. But that's something that is super important to keep in your toolbox because you never know when you're needing to put a frost filter or a gel to make that light a little less cool and bring it into the right color temperature that you're wanting here. Gel back in the day used to have this big swap swap book or color swap book, whatever it was. And it was like this big. I really wish I had some. Probably throwing them out now. This big, and it was like that thick of color gels that you can kind of just go through. And it was really popular in the theaters, and we're using it a lot. And now since, LED is kind of becoming the more, front runner of everything to, save costs and not have to buy lamps and all that fun stuff. It's now becoming a cost saving. And now those color options are mixed into the fixture. So now we don't have to buy gels. But gels are still important because if you do still have an LED, let's say a source for LECO, and you're not getting the right color temperature, or you do have an old style LECO that is a plug-in that's either a 750 watt or a 550 watt, you can still manipulate that color there. And you can get that, that tungsten color or all the way up to that white. I think it's important that you're using it in the right way possible and just don't throw it out because you don't see a use for it right now because you're not very close-minded. You got to be open-minded with that. The next thing is a frost, and you'll see this a lot I would say mostly in hybrid moving fixtures because they have that ability to take a spotlight and turn it into a full-on wash. And pretty much it's just taking and just blowing it out. So that's really nice because it kind of just softens the edges of it, especially if you have a fixture that doesn't have the framing shutters or that ability to kind of manipulate your focus methods there. You can really blow it out and kind of ease your edges on the sides. I think I covered everything on those two, right? Did I miss anything?
I think the
Brian?
one other thing that I would add to it is, when we're talking like moving heads, especially in the DJ level of moving headlights, is that they are actually making the colors that you see basically through gels. I mean, it's not actually gel, it's a piece of glass, but it is a colored piece of glass that is on a wheel inside your moving head. That's why sometimes you'll see like a whole bunch of colors when a color is changing on it. And that's how you get the split colors because it literally just divides the wheel in two. So this is definitely very standard for us. But as you go up into the higher level lights, and I think, at some point it will make it down to the DJ lights because it always does. You have CMY mixing. So instead of RGB, it's cyan, magenta, yellow. But this is actually true color mixing where it's literally moving different plates of these colors around in the fixture to create the colors. And then you're not getting that like quick color flutter when the color of your moving heads change. Real quick piece of advice: if you're using moving heads and you're using all kinds of colors, especially if you're using something like Sound Switch, go in and edit it so that your moving heads stay one color for your entire auto loop or your entire song. Or if your moving heads have this, make sure that you set the option for them to do blackout on color change, and it will instantly improve your light shows with your moving headlights. So like that colors a lot of the basic terms and, hopefully clarifies some of them for people and make sure that we're using them right in lighting. There's a lot more terms, a lot more stuff we can get into, but this is kind of like the basics. If you get these down and you're using them right, you're already ahead of a lot of people. One of the other things that we kind of want to add in on the vocabulary is some of the control surfaces or control methods. So obviously in the DJ world, we're familiar with Sound Switch, we're familiar with Show Express, Wolf Mix. Those are definitely the heaviest hitters, I feel like, for us right now. But as you move up, there's a whole bunch of different ones. So the first one, I think it's probably the most industry standard one of them all, is Grand MA. So currently they're on MA 3. And this is a console that is the Cadillac of lighting consoles. I mean, it is going to cost you $60,000 to buy one. You could almost buy a Cadillac for that much, I think, these days. I haven't looked in a while. But that is like big touring console. So you will see this in stadiums and arenas, music venues all over the world. It's definitely probably one of the most standard ones that we have.
Yep. And it's a language that you have to learn, like when you're programming and just navigating around it, because it's where everything is. You have to know where your footing is first, and then know what the language and how that manipulates the lights, from what I've gathered. And I just touched the water for a hot second, and I was like, "Ooh, this is a whole different beast." Let's be honest.
And you can download their software for free.
Yes.
And play with it on your computer. And it used to be just for Windows, but you can do it on Mac now too, which obviously most DJs are on Mac, or you should be.
Right.
And but you can dabble with it. And then we have Chamsa. I don't know how to say it right. I never have. Which is another one. See, Brenton knows. Another software which they have both consoles and software that you can use on both platforms, and is actually owned by Chauvet DJ, I believe, right? Didn't they buy it?
It's a brand of theirs. Yes. Yep.
That one, see a decent amount of that around. And there's definitely DJs that are dabbling in it. I feel like there are DJs that have kind of gone from the Show Express world into the Camsys world, because they were looking for more advanced features, and Show Express hasn't been updated in 6 years. So they moved on to that. And then I'm actually going to leave the next one to you, Brent, because I believe you own one of these.
I do. It is the Obsidian Onyx series, and they have a whole different line. This is actually owned by Elation, and it was actually bought from Martin Lighting, which you probably don't hear a lot to talk about. They're still out in the market, Martin Lighting, but they pretty much sold off their I think their lighting console business got bought out. So Elation now owns Obsidian, and it's its own branch now. And they have a whole plethora of line of lighting consoles. And not only that, but also like networking for your lighting fixtures, because I hate to say it right now, but DMX is probably going to be dying here soon.
Yes, DMX is probably dying soon. You heard it here first, but no, not really. Yes, we're getting more into the world where ArtNet, SACN, which are actually terms that we didn't talk about earlier, which we should, but I think we're going to save ArtNet and SCAN because those are very complex subjects, but they are basically networking protocols. So if you're noticing that your lights have Ethernet jacks on them, that's why. And that is the future. So we will talk about those in the future.
And I will say, from an MA, Grand MA standpoint, there are a lot of training videos out there, like here on YouTube, just like how we are. But I will say, Camsys and Onyx have like constant emails sent out about like training sessions that are online that you can sign up for free, and learn about their system, because their systems are very powerful. I will say I went down to Chauvet's headquarters, I think it was last year, and I had to jump on a Camsys Magic Q50, I think it was. Within less than 2 hours, like I was able to get around. Once I knew like the foundation of everything and where everything was mapped out. I mean, it's pretty straightforward on how they run their consoles, which was really cool and really nice. And I was able to time code some stuff. So learning those things could be very valuable from that. And then
And a lot of these companies host demo days too.
yes,
And where, it might be a good idea to get on the mailing list of your local production company that does, big rentals. Like here in like Boston, it would be like High Output or Four Wall. But they'll basically bring them in, and they'll bring in a whole set of these consoles, and they'll run a workshop for free, and you can get hands-on with these and learn them and learn the basics, and probably learn some other stuff that you can, even if you're not going to go out and buy one of these consoles, that you can apply to your own programming. And it's totally worth taking it up on taking those offers when they come up. Definitely keep an eye out for those.
And then the next one is Avalites, which has like the Titan Mobile, that it's a brand that's still out there. Some users, lighting designers use it. Is not as common as you would think.
And definitely one that you see more on the touring world and the music world. That's, where you'll see Avalites the most. And then we also have things like ETC, which I think, you see a little bit more in corporate. You also see it in theater. And then if we're going to get real old school in theater, we could talk about Leprechaun.
Ooh. Ooh.
We are recording this on St. Patrick's Day, so we got to talk about Leprechaun, right?
That is true.
So
top of the morning.
And again, like we understand that most of this is out of reach for DJs. Like this is not stuff that you're going to be using for most of your work or looking to get into until you're really moving up into higher level production. But it's important that you kind of know what they are and know that they're around. And it's good to know it, to be able to have the conversation with lighting people and kind of understand where they're coming from and what the worlds are. So,
yep.
Any other like things that we didn't hit on that we should talk about?
The only thing I was going to just throw back out there is that, DMX is to communicate with your fixtures, to control them. You got to have a cable to connect to them, or wirelessly have a solid connection. So, they just don't work miraculously out of the box with your sound switcher or Wolf Mix. Like these terms do matter. And especially if you're working on a show or you're trying to teach your assistants, like, hey, like, this fixture over here, DMX, 1 and personality or mode 4. Cool. Just things that, could really help, because I've worked with a lot of people that are like, wait, what? What do you mean? So if you know that, like, that can become a powerful tool.
Little knowledge goes a long way.
Yep. So I think we're ready to hit the blackout button and wrap episode 7.
Yes, I hope you enjoyed this Lighting 101 episode. We will definitely have more 101 episodes and 201s and 301s and probably some 401s too. So, if you're like, yeah, you already know all this stuff. Well, not everybody does.
Right.
We want to get everybody on the same page.
Exactly. So if you're listening, follow along with us, watching, you can connect with us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. If you're not already subscribed to the channels or follow them, please do. If you do, that'd be great. Also, too, leave us a review. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave them in the comment section below. Shoot us an email at lightsatfullthepod@gmail.com. You can hit us up at our website, lightsatfull.com. I'm Brent Schmidt, one of your co-hosts. That's Brian Smith over there. And we'll see you in the next episode.